He stood at the edge of the river long before the sun rose, the water moving past him like time that refused to slow down. The cold seeped through his boots, biting at his feet, but he did not move. He had learned that pain was easier to endure when it was physical. The ache inside him had no such boundaries. It stretched endlessly, filling every quiet space, every breath he took. The river carried reflections of a life he no longer recognized, and he wondered how something so constant could feel so unfamiliar. His name was Elias, though few people spoke it anymore. Names mattered less when no one waited for you to return. Years earlier, this river had been a place of laughter, of stolen kisses and careless promises whispered into the night. Now it was a witness, silent and impartial, watching him unravel one memory at a time. He turned back toward the cabin tucked between tall pines, its roof worn, its walls scarred by years of wind and rain. It was not the home he had dreamed of building, but it was the one he had survived in. Survival had become his only measure of success. Each day he woke, breathed, worked, and slept, convincing himself that this was enough. That morning, as he split wood behind the cabin, he heard footsteps. They were hesitant, uneven, as if the person carrying them was unsure whether to keep going. Elias froze. No one came here. That had been the unspoken agreement between him and the world. He set the axe down slowly and turned. She stood a few steps away, her coat too thin for the cold, her hair tangled by the wind. Her face was pale, eyes dark with exhaustion and fear. She looked like someone who had run for a long time and only just realized she had nowhere left to go. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely holding together. "I didn't know where else to go." Elias studied her, searching for danger, for intent. He found only desperation. It was a look he knew too well. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not unkindly. "I know," she replied, swallowing hard. "But I'll leave if you want. I just needed to rest. Just for a moment." Something in her words broke through his defenses. Not the request, but the way she said it, as if rest were a luxury she no longer believed she deserved. He stepped aside. "You can stay until the storm passes." Her shoulders sagged in relief, and for the first time since she had arrived, she looked like she might cry. "Thank you." Inside the cabin, the air was warm with the scent of wood smoke. She sat near the fire, holding her hands out as if afraid the warmth might disappear. Elias poured her a cup of water, watching the way her fingers trembled as she drank. "My name is Mara," she said after a while. "I won't cause trouble." "I'm not worried about trouble," he replied. "I'm worried about why you're here." She looked down at her hands, at the faint scars crossing her knuckles. "I left something behind. Or someone. I don't know which is worse." He didn't press her. He knew how words could become weapons when forced too soon. Instead, he offered her food, a place to sleep, silence. That night, the storm howled outside, shaking the cabin, but inside there was an unfamiliar stillness. Elias lay awake, listening to her breathing from the other side of the room, wondering how long it had been since he had shared space with another living soul. Days turned into weeks. Mara stayed. She helped with chores, learned the rhythms of the land, asked questions that revealed both curiosity and caution. Slowly, she began to talk. Not all at once, but in fragments, like pieces of a story she was still trying to understand herself. She spoke of a city that had promised opportunity and delivered cruelty. Of a man who had loved her only when she was useful. Of dreams traded for security, and security that dissolved the moment she needed it most. She spoke of nights spent staring at ceilings she didn't own, wondering how she had become invisible in a world that once felt full of possibility. Elias listened. In her words, he heard echoes of his own past. He had loved once, deeply and without restraint. Her name had been Anna. She had laughed like sunlight, believed in futures and plans. They had built something together, brick by brick, until one moment shattered it all. An accident. A single phone call. A silence that never ended. "I stopped believing in beginnings," Elias admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. "I only believe in endings now." Mara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flames. "Maybe that's because you've been standing still," she said gently. The words struck him harder than he expected. Standing still. He had learned the sound of silence so well that it no longer frightened him. It was the first thing he noticed every morning when he opened his eyes in the small, weather-beaten house at the edge of the valley. No voices, no footsteps, no expectations. Just the wind brushing against the walls and the distant call of birds waking to another day. Silence had become his companion, his punishment, and his protection. His name was Daniel, though in this place, names held little meaning. Years ago, he had chosen this isolation deliberately, believing distance could dull pain. It hadn't. Pain simply learned to live quietly, settling deep inside his chest like an old scar that ached whenever the weather changed. The valley was beautiful in a lonely way. Rolling hills, tall grass that bent under the weight of the wind, and a river that cut through the land like a silver vein. Daniel worked the land just enough to survive. He fixed fences, chopped wood, hunted when he had to. Survival was simple. Living was not. Everything had changed the night his wife died. It had been raining hard, the kind of rain that erased the world beyond the windshield. They were arguing about something trivial, something he could no longer remember. What he did remember was the sound of metal twisting, the violent lurch of the car, and then silence far louder than the one he lived with now. She never woke up. He did. That fact followed him everywhere. The city had become unbearable after that. Every street corner carried memories, every sound reminded him of a life he had failed to protect. So he left. He told no one where he was going, and eventually, no one came looking. Years passed like this, measured by seasons rather than dates. Then one afternoon, as the sky darkened with the promise of rain, Daniel saw someone walking along the dirt road that led toward his house. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. No one walked this road. No one came here. She was small against the vastness of the land, her steps uneven, her posture tense. Daniel felt a flicker of irritation mixed with something else he hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. When she reached his gate, she stopped, gripping the wooden post as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her clothes were dusty, her face pale, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep. Maybe both. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I didn't know where else to go." Daniel studied her carefully. People arrived with stories. Stories usually meant trouble. "You should turn back," he said. "There's nothing here for you." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "I know. I needed somewhere quiet. Just for tonight." He hesitated. Every instinct told him to close the gate, to protect the fragile peace he had built. But another part of him, the part that still remembered kindness, saw the fear in her eyes. "One night," he said finally. "Then you leave." Relief washed over her face so quickly it startled him. "Thank you. I won't be a problem." Inside the house, she sat stiffly at the table while Daniel poured her a glass of water. Her hands trembled as she drank. Up close, he noticed bruises on her wrists, faint but unmistakable. He said nothing. "My name is Lena," she offered quietly. "Daniel." That was all they exchanged that night. He gave her a blanket and pointed to the couch. He slept poorly, his dreams crowded with unfamiliar images and old ghosts. When he woke, she was already up, standing at the window, staring out at the valley as if trying to memorize it. "You can go whenever you're ready," he said. She turned to face him. "Can I stay a little longer?" "I'll work. I won't take anything I don't earn." He should have said no. He knew that. But the word wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded once. A few days. Those days turned into weeks. Lena proved useful, but more than that, she was gentle with the land. She listened when Daniel showed her how to mend fences, how to recognize animal tracks, how to read the sky. She asked questions, but never too many. She respected silence, something Daniel had learned few people could do. Slowly, pieces of her story surfaced. She had left a relationship that had become dangerous, a life built on promises that turned into control and fear. She carried guilt for staying as long as she did, shame that weighed heavier than her small backpack. "I thought love meant endurance," she said one evening as they sat outside, watching the sun sink behind the hills. "I didn't realize it shouldn't hurt all the time." Daniel felt the words settle deep inside him. He understood endurance. He had built his entire life around it. But he had never considered that love might be something else entirely. As the weeks passed, something shifted. The house felt less empty. Silence no longer pressed down so hard. Daniel caught himself listening for Lena's footsteps, noticing the sound of her laughter when she forgot to be careful with it. It frightened him. One night, a storm rolled in fast and violent. Thunder shook the windows, lightning tearing across the sky. Daniel woke to the sound of Lena crying softly from the couch. He hesitated, then sat beside her. "You're safe," he said, unsure if it was true. She looked at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. "I don't know how to be anymore." The honesty of her confession broke something open in him. He told her about his wife, about the accident, about the guilt that had kept him frozen in time. He told her things he had never said out loud. "I thought if I stopped feeling, it would stop hurting," he admitted. It didn't. Lena reached for his hand, tentative, as if asking permission. When he didn't pull away, she held on. The contact was simple, but it felt like crossing a boundary neither of them knew how to name. Their closeness grew slowly, carefully. There were no grand declarations, no sudden promises. Just shared meals, shared work, shared moments of quiet understanding. Daniel felt himself changing, resisting it even as he welcomed it. Then one morning, Lena was gone. Her blanket lay folded on the couch. Her bag was missing. Panic rose in Daniel's chest, sharp and unexpected. He searched the land, calling her name, his voice swallowed by the valley. Hours passed before he found her near the river, standing at the same spot where he used to stand every morning. "I was going to leave without saying goodbye," she said when she saw him. "I thought it would be easier." "For who?" he asked, anger and fear colliding inside him. "For you," she whispered. "You don't need someone like me complicating your life." He stared at her, realizing how close he had come to losing something he hadn't known he needed. "You don't get to decide that for me," he said. "You don't get to leave because you're afraid of being loved." The word hung between them, fragile and terrifying. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm afraid because I want to stay." "So am I," he admitted. "But fear doesn't have to be the end." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "What if we break each other? Then we heal together," he said. "Or we try." She stayed. Life didn't become perfect. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments when old wounds resurfaced. But there was also laughter, trust, and a growing sense of belonging. Daniel learned that love wasn't a replacement for loss, but a continuation of life. Lena learned that safety didn't require surrendering herself. One evening, as they sat watching the stars emerge one by one, Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "I used to think running away was strength," she said. "Now I think staying is." Daniel wrapped his arm around her, feeling the quiet,